It has become almost a truism to say that public discourse is broken down. Conversations that once might have been spaces for shared exploration now often collapse into accusation, defensiveness, or silence. Analysts point to polarization, to the speed of social media, or to the erosion of trust in institutions. Yet beneath these forces lies something even more basic: the failure of listening. Discourse depends on the capacity not just to speak, but to hear, to allow another's perspective to enter without immediately translating it into a threat. If discourse is the body, listening is the breath that sustains it. When listening falters, everything else begins to suffocate. The collapse of listening in modern discourse stems from a subtle but corrosive shift, the reflexive misinterpretation of expression as prescription. Where once a statement of belief could be heard as a personal perspective, now it is often received as an implicit demand, a covert claim about the listener's identity or worldview. The shift is not in the words themselves, but in the interpretive stance applied to them. When I say, "I believe X," am I opening a window into my own perception, or am I attempting to overwrite yours? The difference between those two readings is the difference between dialogue and defensiveness, between enrichment and coercion. Once beliefs are habitually misheard as prescriptions, conversation ceases to feel safe. Listening is no longer an act of curiosity, it becomes an act of submission. What unfolds next follows predictable patterns. Every act of communication is triadic. There is the speaker's expression, the listener's interpretation, and the shared context in which both occur. In a healthy cycle, expression is heard as self-locating, interpretation is curious rather than defensive, and the shared context registers dialogue as a contribution. But once expression is received as prescription, the cycle becomes dissonant. Interpretation hardens into suspicion. The context shifts toward hostility, and value drains out of listening. The result is that each statement is treated less as an offering and more as a bid for control. Because belief and identity are bound so tightly together in contemporary life, this distortion magnifies itself. When a person's belief is heard constructively, it enriches their identity without threatening anyone else's. But when heard prescriptively, it feels contagious, as though one must either adopt it or repudiate both the belief and the believer. Disagreement then ceases to be about ideas and instead becomes a rejection of persons. At scale, this produces cultural polarization. People learn to assume coercion in advance, respond defensively, and retreat into hardened positions. The media environment accelerates this breakdown. Social platforms privilege engagement, and conflict generates engagement most reliably. Expressions that are misinterpreted as prescriptive, and therefore provoke outrage, are weighted more heavily and spread more widely. In this way, the misinterpretive stance itself is reinforced as the cultural norm. What might once have been an occasional breakdown in listening has now been scaled up into the default mode of public discourse. People expect coercion, so they hear coercion, and the cycle renews itself with each new statement. And yet, the structure of the problem also suggests the structure of its resolution. The triadic logic shows that what matters most is the listener's choice of interpretation. To hear expression as prescription is to close off. To hear it as expression is to stay open. The difference lies not in the statement but in the stance. Overcoming the conditioning of suspicion requires nothing mystical. Only the recognition that listening is an interpretive act, and that misinterpretation leads pretty predictably to escalation. If we understand the logic, we can resist it. The path to restoration lies in cultivating interpretive generosity. Now, this does not mean agreeing with every belief expressed, nor does it mean suppressing disagreement. It means granting others the dignity of owning their own perception. It means, well, pausing to ask, before reacting, whether what was spoken was intended as contribution rather than command. And it means speakers, too, should aid the process by clarifying intent as, "This is what I see," and not, "This is what you must see." To say that people no longer listen is to say that suspicion has replaced generosity as the default lens of interpretation. But that default is not inevitable. It is a habit, reinforced by cultural and technological structures, and habits can be changed. Listening will only be restored when individuals, communities, and institutions reclaim the constructive reading of expression, resisting the reflex to hear coercion in every belief. The choice is simple, but its effects are actually quite profound. To hear others as describing their perception rather than dictating ours. Only then can dialogue become possible again.